stop it so you don't hear background noise.
Is it a Roomba?
And it's like a Roomba, yeah. It's a I forget what it's called, an Etsy or something. I can tell you the name. They're great.
I know I've had a few of them, and I put my foot down after the we had one of our dogs went to the bathroom at like 2 a.m. in the living room, and the Roomba got it,
and it's smeared all everywhere.
Yeah,
oh, that's rough.
But that was like the third Roomba I think we've been through, and not because of the dogs, but just like they wear out over time. And so this time it's like my wife wanted to get another one. It's like, you know what? I've put $3,000 into these things already. I'm tired. You know, each one.
That's a hell of a vacuum cleaner.
Well, yeah, they're $1,000. You can get the Highline model.
Yeah, for a really, really good one, you can get them cheaper than that. But it sounds like they ought to have like a poop sensor.
Yeah. They say they do.
They the one we have, I think, was $400 or something. It works fine. Mm-hmm. Maybe $300-$400. My wife read on Consumer Reports and got the one they said it works fine.
Yeah, my friend just bought one. I think it was like $450, and it was, you know, it had all the nice features. We've got an upstairs, downstairs, so you know, you could sell me 2 of them, but that's what my kids are for.
Maybe our oldest is old enough now, but I put my foot down. I'm tired of investing in the Roombas. What I told her, so. It's not that hard to pull a Dyson off the wall, basically.
Nope.
Yeah, who knew they were going to come on and hear about vacuum cleaners and dog poo?
It's Refresh Friday, so anything that needs to be refreshed is fair game as far as I'm concerned.
We'll be on here all day.
Right.
But we can talk about bourbon, you know, Pappy Van Winkle or whatever.
Oh, sure.
I got beers and crabs coming up this weekend.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
Yeah. Celebrate my dad's birthday.
Cool. Chesapeake crabs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Actually, I mean, they are Maryland Chesapeake crabs.
Oh, well, here we go, guys. Yeah, they got to come.
That's how you know you're from Maryland.
Or Virginia.
Yeah. There's parts of Virginia, Northern Virginia, but it is so weird. Once you start going outside of that area, people have no idea what crabs, you know, they know what crabs are, but you know, you could stick them in a bushel of crabs in front of them. They wouldn't know what the hell to do with them.
It's true.
Yeah, they're used to those ones that come from Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
And those just
totally
don't
different.
Those just don't.
No,
cut
they don't cut it.
Me.
Not even close.
They're too watery and they don't have much taste. And you know, they made a big. First time I was in San Francisco, we were, you know, went to right along the wharf, and we were going to get crabs and see what they were like. And I was like, "This is what they're like." I mean,
yeah. No good.
I can tell you, since moving from Virginia and loving the crabs there, and then coming up here to Vermont, the lobster scene's pretty good.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, I love lobster.
Lobster's awesome.
I can handle that. Yeah.
I just read that the price is going up enormously. A good lobster sandwich, I hear, is super expensive at the moment.
I remember once I went to Pandora. What's the bread place? Starts
Panera?
with Panera Bread, and they had some lobster sandwich special, and the price was market price. And so I was like, I'll give it a shot. It was like $20.
Yeah.
Never again. $20 for a lobster. Yeah. I'll pass.
I did the same thing with a steak once, Jeff. I got a big surprise when I got the check.
Well, they say, you know, if you got to ask what the price is, it means you can't afford it.
I don't think I could afford it at that point, but I got it anyway.
Do they say that at Panera?
Yeah, they do.
This was a Wagyu beef thing.
That was probably a $200 steak close to it.
It was close to a $200 steak.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised when I got the bill.
Well, speaking about being surprised by the bill, isn't that why you're here today, Tom?
It is, so Alex.
You don't get surprised by the bill.
That's much more pleasant.
So I give a little color here, and then Tom, I'll let you speak about yourself. But how we got here today was you and I ran into each other at the Auto Intel Summit, and we started talking. And Tom and I, we didn't really compete as dealerships because we at Checkered Flag carried all foreign vehicles, and your family, with the exception of Subaru, was Chevrolet.
Right.
However, you guys did a mean Chevrolet business, probably on that Ford dealership next door. But you can speak to that. But Tom's store had the best real estate in Virginia, probably. I think you had, my dad told me once that the corner that your store was on was the most trafficked store in all of Virginia.
I think that was probably true.
Are the photos of that dealership on your Better Vantage Point website?
They are.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So my father moved the dealership to that location in 1964. And at that time, it wasn't even called Virginia Beach. It was called Princess Anne County.
Oh, wow.
Right.
And there were only 5,000 people in Princess Anne County at that time. And so as the area grew, Virginia Beach is now the largest city in Virginia. And I guess its population is somewhere between 450 and 500,000 people. So little luck involved in that. Yeah.
Where were you guys before? So I wasn't around before in '63. So,
Neither was I. I was a twinkle in my father's eye, as they say. So my father bought the dealership. It was then Clark Chevrolet. And this won't be meaningful for a lot of the listeners, but it's where Mary's Country Kitchen is. That used to be the showroom down very close to the beach. And so he moved, he built the building there and moved sometime in late 64.
Yeah, so 17th Street, the original Virginia Beach Boulevard, over to the current Virginia Beach Boulevard, right?
Right. That's exactly right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and how long had that dealership been in the family?
Well, my family started, Jeff, in the car business in 1925. So I'm actually a third generation car guy. My grandfather was in the business. My father and my uncle were in the business. And my brother and I were in the business. And what happened was in 1925, after my grandfather bought that business, I think it was the late 70s and my uncle always worked for my grandfather. My father left in the 60s for this opportunity. They did not want to join him in that venture. So he went out on his own. As the area grew, they became competitors, right? The interstate went in, and the big Virginia Beach Boulevard went in. Everything got bigger. And the dealership Kline Chevrolet, which was my grandfather and my uncle's store, moved to Chesapeake back, I guess, in the late 70s, early 80s. And again, as the area grew, they became competitors. But my father chose to leave working for his father and his uncle back in the 60s.
Okay. Very cool. So 100 years.
100 years, 1925. I still have the ashtray. I still have the ashtray that was my grandfather's, and it says courtesy and fairness since 1925. So
that's great.
It's great that it's an ashtray.
Of course,
Yes.
absolutely. And my favorite, and I think Jeff, there's some pictures on my website. I haven't looked at it in a minute, but of his waiting room in the 1950s, and all the very well dressed gentlemen have white socks and black shoes on, because that was the thing then, right?
Uh-huh. Yep. Well, I also see a picture of Muhammad Ali apparently had purchased a car from you.
He bought a Corvette. That's
Very
right.
cool.
He bought a
That's
Corvette.
awesome. That's
Yeah.
cool. You still have all these older photos posted. That's
Yeah,
very
it is
neat.
cool. It is cool. I'm sorry, obviously I
Really.
don't have more, but I post them on LinkedIn and Facebook from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
No, that's great.
you're
Great
quite
story.
active on LinkedIn, Tom. So I would encourage anyone to reach out and connect.
Absolutely. Happy to connect. Happy to
Yeah,
connect.
I'm
I
gonna do
am
that
very
right now.
active on LinkedIn.
So Tom, you obviously with the dealership experience of 30 years was the transition away from the store. How did that go for you?
Well, that was, I guess from an emotional perspective, it was very odd, because the dealership had been there my whole life. I'm 56, and had been there since, we used to stop on Saturday afternoons, whatever we were doing, and check and see how many were on the board, right? See what was going on, and we do that before we go out to dinner. And I was like, why is this taking so long? What's going on? Obviously my father was checking in and seeing what's going on. So uh so that part was unusual, but I saw a need, and for what I do, there really isn't anybody else that I'm aware of that actually kind of does what I do, which is risk mitigation for dealerships. And in a nutshell, risk mitigation is making sure that the gross that you make on the front end doesn't walk out the back door, because you don't have the proper procedures in place or insurance in place, um, or making sure you're doing, obviously a whole number of things. So, kind of a loss mitigation and loss prevention strategies. And that's what I did at the dealership for many, many years.
How'd you get
Goodness,
started
that's
in
gotta
that?
yeah, that's gotta take forever. I mean, all the regulations that businesses have nowadays, especially in the dealer world, can't imagine what it's like to keep up with everything.
It's hard, right? You have to make an effort. You don't want to be in a position where a regulator walks into your business, and they can say that you're, and I use quotes, you're willfully non-compliant, because you're going to be writing a six-figure check if you're willfully non-compliant. I mean, I just posted, Alex, you mentioned LinkedIn. I just posted an article. The article was posted for Dealer Marketing Magazine yesterday that I wrote, and it's called "Let the Government Be Your Customer Service Department." That's the title of the article. And it details three different scenarios that have happened in the last 60 days, where Carvana being one, Vroom being two, and Napleton Automotive in the Midwest being number three. And I'll come back and tell you each one of their problems. They didn't take care of their customer problems. And as a result, the regulators stepped in and helped them take care of the problems. And so the article is, let the government be your customer service department, because if you're not going to do it, eventually they're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Carvana got suspended, and then reinstated from the state of Illinois for being able to transact any title work, because if I recall correctly, they had 80 or 90 written complaints to the attorney general. And so the attorney general stepped in and said, we're not going to have this. Vroom, which is a Carvana-like, company, the Texas attorney general stepped in because they had thousands of complaints. So they filed a lawsuit against Vroom. I really don't know where that stands at the moment. And this is all since April 1st. And then Napleton Automotive, which has, I believe, 80 stores, 83 stores, something like that. They were accused by the Federal Trade Commission of product stuffing, where, for those folks who aren't listening, who are listening, who don't know what that is, that's when you insert products into a customer's payment that they either don't know about, or you quote the payment in a way that it includes these products. But
Mm-hmm.
the FTC did a survey of Napleton's customers, and let's pause there. Why would Napleton give them all that data in order to let them do that survey? They must have had some leverage over them.
Whew.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know. I'm just telling you what the press release from the FTC said. And the press release said that 83% of its customers said that they had a product stuffed that they didn't want. And so that was half the complaint. And the other half the complaint was they were discriminating against a minority. And of course, when these things happen, my brain goes to, what policies and procedures did they not have to allow this to happen? And using Napleton as an example, if they had had a menu that matched a buyer's order, that matched a retail installment sales contract, and they had their billing department making sure that those three documents always matched, something as simple as that, then I don't think they would have had that allegation. I mean, again, I don't know their operation. I have never been in it. I've never seen it. But it would seem to me, a simple procedure is to make sure those three documents match. And then after all that, my brain goes to, well, did they have insurance to cover any of this? So then you begin to kind of dissect insurance coverage and say, well, some dealer garage policies have third-party discrimination coverage, which means if somebody alleges that you're discriminating against someone, you can turn over to your insurance company, and your insurance company will adjudicate the claim. Other possible ways that they might have had that covered is directors and officers insurance. I see Christine Plunkett just messaged in. Hi, Christine. Directors and officers insurance can often cover things like that. So it's not just, when you see these things in the news, it's not just what happened. My head always goes to, what did they do about it? Or did they write a check for 10 million? I ran into somebody, Alex, at Digital Dealer, who knows them allegedly and said that he believes they wrote the check for 10 million. That's obviously anecdotal, but he was pretty confident about it. So things happen if you don't have proper procedures in place.
Tom, like, we should really dive into payment packing or payment stuffing a little more. Like,
that's what I wanted to dive into. So
that
payment
happens.
stuffing. I don't know how a dealership can get away with that anymore, because there's so many things that you need to sign off on. Like if you don't purchase an extended warranty, at least it is here in Maryland, you've got to sign off the fact that you were presented the extended warranty and you are declining it. So
right.
how do they get away with the payment?
But worksheets, Jeff. Worksheets.
You're supposed to. Now, whether there are still some companies that don't have menus, and then the menus. Some of the menus I see, Jeff, they have like gold, silver, platinum, right? And you can choose one of them. Of course, those should show the base payment before any other products. Otherwise, you open yourself up to claims of product stuffing. But where some of those menus don't go, which is not good, is you should have a 2-page menu. First page, if you want to show it that way. And then the second page should say, here are all the items that we accept, and here's all the items that we reject. So you want to have 2 columns and have the customer sign that piece of paper that says that they understand that they're accepting these and that they're rejecting these.
Okay.
But also so you mentioned you want to coordinate 3 documents. So you have the buyer's order, the worksheet that gets presented on the showroom floor. Then you have the menu that's presented in the F&I office traditionally, followed by the actual contract, also presented in the F&I office traditionally. So I think, and the worksheet is the key word for me. It's like, it's not just the worksheet though, right? I mean, payments are quoted to customers over the phone, on the lot, via email, all these different ways. And, if there is some sort of buffer that's applied in the payment when it's quoted to the customer, that puts you into that payment packing realm, right?
Right. Well, one of the things that I advocate, all kinds of things, as you know, happen on the sales floor. But in my opinion, the F&I manager, once everything's settled, the F&I manager should run another buyer's order that has gap in the service contract. So there should be more than one buyer's order. The buyer's order, usually what happens, unless you're in a store where like A to Z Sync, where they have the salesman do everything. But in most traditional stores, buyer's order signed up at the sales, in the sales department, and then the customer goes down into the F&I department. The F&I manager, after the customer has selected what products, I would encourage them to do another buyer's order detailing again, here are all the products. Here's how much you bought the car for. Here are all the products. Here's everything. And then the buyer's order should match the menu, right? The payments on the menu, which should match the retail installment sales contract.
There you go.
That's good advice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's an extra step. It is an extra step, but it does. It does. Sorry, Jeff.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I was just because Alex mentioned, price quoting out on the floor or via email, but they're not official documents. Is there something, that a dealership should include? Like, for example, with an email, you're going to send the customer an email quote, and it's just a typed out, because they want to know what payments are. Maybe you cushion it with $20 a month. I mean, is that going to put you in trouble?
Well, it depends on the rest of the documentation, Jeff. I mean, when lawsuits are filed, and I just reviewed a federal lawsuit over the past, week, the plaintiff produced 1,585 pages of documents, and the dealership produced probably 150 pages of documents on this particular case. And I'm the expert witness on the case, so I have to look at everything and make conclusions. Everything is going to be taken in totality. So if you're quoting payments before you've pulled credit, that's one thing. If you're quoting payments after you've pulled credit, that's a different thing, right?
Okay.
So it's going to be, I think it's going to be case dependent, and I think it's going to be every car deal is different, and everything, how they got to that payment, and did they quote it before they knew, and did they say, well, generally, if your credit stinks to you're brilliant, then here's a range. I mean, it really depends on what the process is at the store.
Ooh,
okay.
So wow. Okay. So think about this scenario. You have a digital retailing solution on your website that does a soft credit pull. The customer's shown a payment, and then they come into the dealership, and the showroom floor starts them all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And has no clue that the credit was pulled in the digital retailing tool or anything. So they have no connection to that device.
That can be a problem, right? If the customer says, well, gosh, when I went through your website, my payment was only $520 and now it's $590. And that's, what's going on, right? Then you get into a sticky situation. So, I certainly advocate a very seamless process if you're going to have be quoting customers either through any of these applications, of which there are a lot of great ones. But you better have a process to know what's been quoted to the customer before, when they're in front of the salesman, so that you know where you are. Otherwise, you're gonna create a problem for yourself.
It's good to know. I'm sure that's happening more often than what we realize.
I'm sure it's happening a lot.
Jeff's got one name that just popped up in his head. Starts with an A, I'm sure. His sales managers.
And I'll tell you one other thing under the things that you don't know that can hurt you. The Home Solicitation Act. This is another thing I've been talking to dealers about since these digital retailing tools have become so widespread and so important. The Home Solicitation Act was originally that act so the vacuum cleaner salesman wouldn't sell you $1,000 vacuum cleaner back in the 60s, right? So what it says, though, and I've had various attorneys tell me their various opinions, but I'm going to tell you the conservative opinion. If you're doing any negotiating or sales at the home, not just delivering the car, here's your car, but if it's here's your car and sign this paperwork, then all of a sudden you're negotiating and you're in the process. If you're not complying with the Home Solicitation Act, the potential penalties are crazy because what they say is that the customer can come back at any time and ask for all their money back. And at any time also includes 7 years later after they've trashed the car, it has 200,000 miles on it, they can come back and say, you didn't comply with the Home Solicitation Act and I want all my money back.
I've heard of this. And also, I think the dealership had to deal with that at one point, and then that's when they decided they'll never do a home delivery again.
Well, it's complying with it is easy. You have to give them a letter essentially that says, if you want to cancel the sale for any reason, just send this in by 3 days from now. And that's, they have to sign one other piece of paper, and that's essentially it. But dealers are squeamish, I'll say, about giving anybody the right to change the sale because they got the metal on the street and they want to ensure they have the sale. So they've rather endure the risk of doing that. And that's risk mitigation, right? Which is, I say to the dealer, here's your risk and here's what can happen. And it's up to you what you want to do. That's your business and your business practices. But my job is to make sure they know what the problems are. And then we can go back and audit them if they choose or whatever. But here's a risk. And so what do you want to do about it? So it is a potentially big problem.
How do are you familiar with companies like how Carvana or Vroom takes because they do the delivery to the dealer, to the customer's house? How do they handle that, or is it because it's full digital online they're able to circumvent that?
I don't know of my own knowledge, so I have zero information. But if they're doing it right, then they have to comply with the Home Solicitation Act. That's my opinion. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a business guy and business consultant. But based on the attorneys that I've spoken with, that's my interpretation. And it's an old act, but all of a sudden it's getting new light because of being able to buy a car online.
Well, and Ford just announced, I think yesterday, there was a interview or some type of conversation
with Farley.
Correct.
Yeah, I read that this morning.
Yeah. So they want to take, over the full transaction straight to the consumer with their
They've never
EV
tried
product.
that before.
Yeah, that's.
Well, what Farley said, and I didn't read it extensively. I read like the first 2 or 3 paragraphs, but he said we certainly want the dealers to be there to service the vehicles.
Yeah,
because I guess he figured out that he doesn't want to go into the real estate business and all of a sudden open these mega centers or whatever they're going to do. And I posted on a colleague's page who had actually posted this article. I did the math and I said, okay, let's say the average Ford dealership is worth 10 million blue. Forget the real estate for a minute. I just picked 10 million because it's a nice round number. I Googled it. It looks like there's like 1,581 Ford dealers in the country. So I rounded that down to 1,500. So 10 million times 1,500 is $15 trillion. So either Ford's going to have to come up with $15 trillion because every single dealer is going to sue them for their blue sky, right? I mean, if somebody was taking $10 million out of your pocket, you'd certainly sue them. So either they're going to have to do, but even if my math is 50% off, they're
Yeah.
still going to have to come up with $7.5 trillion, right? I mean, so I don't know how they're going to do it. I mean, it's a lot of talk and there's a lot of noise, but Jeff, I don't know how they're going to actually, even if they want to do it, I don't know if how they'll actually can move forward with it.
Interesting. I think they just see, you know, like maybe they see some of the success that you know, Tesla had, and maybe they think they can just quickly, you know, adapt to that or try and recreate it. I don't know. You know, and we talk about this a lot on DealerRefresh, because when we look at all the studies and the data points, and of course, you know, a bunch of dealers in the community, you know, their own personal experience, it's not, I mean, majority consumer does not want to purchase their vehicle that way.
Yeah, I think I'll speak for me because I've been recently looking for a vehicle for myself. Actually, the first vehicle I bought was October of last year. I was 55 years old, was the first time I bought a vehicle in my life. So
it's fun, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I got taxed on my vehicle in case the IRS is watching. I always got taxed on my demo. But I think, you know, from the consumer perspective, I think they want to go in and touch it and feel it and smell it. And how does that work? And if they're there, why not transact? Why do it from the house? I mean, I can understand kind of getting, you know, lower in the funnel before they go in, and some certainly do want to transact through the internet, and I think that's great if they want to do it, if they know what they want, and they, you know, they don't have to go in and look at it. But so many customers want to touch and feel what they're buying and smell it and look at it, that I have a hard time thinking that that's going to go any different way.
Same.
Well, so here's something. I thought about this quite a bit, because in my entire automotive career, there's always been something that was going to get rid of the salesperson or get rid of the dealership. There's always a threat to that thing. And then, you know, once it had its 15 minutes of fame, it sort of died off. But there's about 80% of the consumers out there, they do want to interact with that large ass purchase before they pull it. And eBay Motors proved, when the internet was going to get rid of the salesperson, that only 1% of the population would actually buy a vehicle sight unseen. That was about what eBay Motors was doing. And then Carvana and Vroom started to compete for that 1%. And that's what they were pulling from originally. Tesla is its own beast. That's you know, you want an electric car, you want a virtue signal or whatever you want to do. That's what you're doing with that one, and you're going to go through whatever process they put in front of you. But with that 1% that Carvana and Vroom were fighting over, that has grown, right? We've got, you know, it's way more than 1% now.
6% or something now, right? I mean, something like that.
However, there's a lot of people who have gone through their process and are not happy.
Well, the Texas Attorney General knows thousands, so...
So, yeah, we'll see where it all shakes out.
Yeah, it will be interesting, and we'll see whether Carvana continues to focus on the retail side. Right, they are either just bought or are buying Odessa. I know there was some talk when I was at Digital Dealer. Some of the dealers were saying, "Well, I'm not using Odessa anymore. Why would I?" So, you know, we'll see how all that shakes out. There's a lot. And they're paying dearly for their financing. I read whoever it was who lent them the money to do the Odessa deal. I think it was the interest rate they're paying on those bonds. I think was somewhere between 10 and 12%, as I read. So they are really paying through the nose for that financing.
On what was that? $7 billion? Was that the transaction amount?
I don't know. That part I don't remember.
I don't know, but it was a B number. So
it was a big number.
That's a lot of interest.
It's a lot of interest. Yeah, I don't know how they pay that, but you know,
just do another funding round, right?
Yeah, right. Of course, just Go downstairs and print some more money.
Yeah. Amazon wasn't profitable forever.
Right.
Just stick with us. We'll get there. There's this other company called, was it Theranos or something that did that too? I don't know.
That was anyway. The pharmaceutical company that made up their results.
Yes.
Yes. And then their founder got convicted for lying and cheating and generally doing bad things.
I'm not saying that that's what Carvana's doing, but
of course not. No, we're not saying that.
But yeah, you can't just fundraise forever.
It's true. It's very true.
Well, how about advertising?
Okay.
Payment packing, I probably scared the bejesus out of some of us. I know it did me. Now, I think a lot of our audience is in the advertising game, including the vendors.
Right.
And what are some practices that can really get you in trouble if you're not careful, that we might not be looking at, get blindsided by?
Yeah. So dealership problems, in my experience, come in 3 different forms. 2 of them are two-legged, which is customer problems and employee problems. The third is advertising problems. Now, the first part and the biggest disconnect, there's a lot of disconnects, but sometimes actually, I'm going to say most of the time in the stores, there's a disconnect between what's being advertised and what the sales agents are trained on, if they are trained at all. So I'll use an example. The ABC car has a payment of $500 if you put $5,000 down. Then that's what's being advertised by the ad agency. Well, is anybody interfacing with the actual sales team to say, hey, this week's special, and I know we're in a little bit of a different area with inventory and there's not as much inventory. And I get that the advertising has changed as a result of the lack of inventory, but just go with me here for a second. Does the sales team know that $500 payment can be done as long as the customer puts, $4,000 or $5,000 down, whatever it is? Has anybody told them? Because what will happen when they're out on the lot, the customer will come in and say, I'm interested in that car because it's $500 a month. And the salesman will be like, well, wait a minute, you can't buy that car for $500 a month. I don't know who told you that. Right. And they'll say something stupid. And the customer will be like, well, that's what you were advertising. What do you mean? And so there's a huge disconnect that I see between the marketing side and the sales side. So that's the first problem. Secondly, and I can go on almost any website and find advertising violations. It doesn't take long. Here's the biggest one first, and then I'll kind of walk down the list. On the sale price, whatever that is, whether it's the Alex Snyder price or whatever it's termed, is there an asterisk that ties in the disclaimer that says that this car can be bought plus taxes, a processing fee, depending on what state you're in. New York, you can only have $175 processing fee. Virginia, you can do what you want. Each state is different. But is there an asterisk that ties the sale price down to the disclaimer? Because the Federal Trade Commission says, and the NADA agrees with this, the NADA put out a 94-page book that's got all the advertising regulations, and it's very exciting reading. And if anybody'd like a synopsis, you can call me because I'll tell you what it says. But if you don't put that asterisk there, then it's assumed that the taxes and licenses are all included in that price. And so talk about class action.
So just putting the disclaimer at the bottom of the listings page and the bottom of each details page is not enough.
That is correct. Because it's not tied to anything. How does the customer know that they have to go look at it? Unless it doesn't have to be an asterisk. It can be a cross. It can be an X. It can be a 1 or a whatever. Mm-hmm. There has to be a footnote. It's got to tie to something. Otherwise, the customer says, oh, look, I can get that. And so if you think about the class action exposure that you have, if you sell 300 cars a month, times an average taxes and licenses is $2,500 times 12 months times whatever the statute of limitations is on that issue, which I imagine, like in Virginia, is probably 2 years because it's considered a written contract, I would guess. You're talking about big money, big money just for not having a little asterisk there. That's a big problem, and almost every single website does that wrong. But that's how it's supposed to be.
Dealers, better go check the website.
Better check it
Are
soon.
you on yours right now, Jeff?
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk afterwards, Jeff. Give me a call after.
Yeah. Probably got a little work to do.
Yeah. I have a meeting on Monday at a state, and I was looking at that particular dealer's website. At the bottom, they've got 20% down plus 4.9%, et cetera, et cetera. Well, in that case, they left out the words APR. And it's called a trigger term, and you have to use the words APR. So having the disclaimers correct, and then making sure the disclaimer is correct. Then another issue I see is I've gone on multiple dealers' websites and click on the Carfax and see all the damaged vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And if the dealer isn't, he's obviously disclosing that in the advertising, but if they don't get this is my opinion, if they don't have the customer sign that Carfax when they're selling the car, acknowledging that damage, the customer can come back at a later date and say, you didn't tell me this car was in an accident. You just said it was a good used car. And the standard, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but having done this for a while, the standard is, did you know or should have known, right? Because we're the industry experts. So whether we knew it was an accident or if you put it up on a lift, we should have known. That's going to give the lawyers an opportunity to come back and sue you and say you didn't disclose the proper damage to the customer. So that's a quasi website issue, but it's also a how are you transacting your business issue? How are you, for example, if you spotted a car, didn't get done, you've repossessed it, and you put it back for sale, technically you're supposed to sell that as a repossession because you have repossessed, whether it's a new car or not. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm telling you that I've seen lawsuits that have alleged these things enough, and you're not really disclosing the true nature of the goods. There was an example recently. A lawsuit was filed, and I used this in a compliance training at a dealer group that I do consulting for. There was a dealership in Newport News, Alex, and this dealership it was a Hyundai dealership, and they sold a car as new when the car had been stolen and recovered. They didn't disclose it, and in this particular case, the way have you talked about this before?
No, but going through this right now.
Yeah, we're dealing with that right now. We had a vehicle stolen and was able to recover it.
Call me after, Jeff.
I was wondering. I was like, wonder if we have to disclose that. Sounds like we do.
So in this particular case, Hyundai has apparently a home link, or there's some mechanism that it phones home for whatever it phones home for. I'm not familiar with the actual thing, but they couldn't. It was stuck in stolen recovery mode. And the dealership couldn't get it out of stolen recovery mode after they had sold it. This one went on for a year and a half. The dealership didn't do anything, didn't try to buy it back from the customer. The lawsuit's not clear as to whether the customer was still paying for it for that year and a half, but it looks to me the way the lawsuit was stated that they were. And so finally the customer after a year and a half said, I'm done. And they just sued the dealership. And mostly the nature of that lawsuit was that it wasn't disclosed that the car was stolen and recovered. So the true nature of what what that car was. So again, this is a risk issue, right? If you say, hey, I don't want to, I'll take the chance the customer finds out, and take the chance that NCIC, the National Crime Computer, isn't going to keep that information, and that it's not going to void the warranty, and they're not going to have any warranty problems, and all the myriad of things that happen during a customer's ownership experience. It's your business risk. When your feet hit the floor in the morning, it's up to you to decide if that's worth it or not. And my job is to say, here's the situation. Now in Virginia, for example, just to give you the other extreme, if you have less than 3% damage on a new car in Virginia, you're not required to disclose it. And that excludes bumpers and glass. So if you have more than 3%, because the bumper and the glass throw it over 3%, the law in Virginia says it's still less than 3%, and you don't have to disclose it. You can choose whether to disclose it or not. But that's what the law
interesting. And those typically run state by state, correct?
Correct. That is correct. So,
well, Tom,
each
how about a crazy one, real quick?
Yeah, what's some of the craziest?
Yeah, so let's start with customers. What's the craziest customer dispute you've ever seen? I'm
going to give you 2 or 3 crazy ones. When back in the day when I was selling cars, you're still taught you treat everybody as everybody can buy a car. Everybody don't prejudge somebody how they look. They could be on their day off, and right, that whole thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm on the sales floor. This is in 1990 or 91. I'm on the sales floor. This guy comes in. He has an eye patch on, and he is creepy. And when I tell you he's creepy, I mean like beyond what I could explain. So he says, I want to look at a Corvette. I said, okay, I'll be right back. So I went to the desk, touch base, went to the desk, and I said, I'm not going on a test drive with this guy, and feel free to fire me, because I am not going on a test drive. I don't care what you tell this guy. I don't care what I tell this guy. I am not going on a test drive. So we came up with a story and said our insurance company won't let us take Corvettes out on Saturdays due to insurance reasons. But we'll be happy to help him on Monday if he wants to come back. So I go deliver that. And he goes Monday morning. Picture him in the Virginia newspaper, the Virginia Beach newspaper, the Virginia Pilot. He's on the front page. He hijacked a car and killed somebody.
No.
Wow.
Oh shit.
So
that's crazy.
P.S. Wow. I didn't get fired, by the way.
You dodged a bullet there, literally.
I dodged a bullet on that one. So that's one extreme. The next extreme story I'll tell you is, it was a July day. This is, 15, 20 years ago. It must have been 104. This is before global warming. 104, hot as Hades, and the humidity was at least 100%. And
so a typical Virginia Beach day.
Typical summer day. And this woman starts picketing in front of the dealership. So I walk out to her, and she's got an umbrella, and she's got a picket. And I said, "Hi, ma'am. My name's Tom Kline. I'm part of the management team here. And how can I help you?" I don't remember what the picket sign said. I said, I'd like to help you. How can I help you? And she turns to me and she says, "You stole my uterus."
Oh, God.
And I said to her, "Excuse me?" And she repeated herself, like, I know what I'm saying, and I don't know what's wrong with your hearing. So I said, "Well, why don't you come on inside and I'll get you a cold Coke and we'll sit down and we'll talk about it. And she said, and she said, no, I'm going to pick it. And I said, well, ma'am, have you ever bought anything from us? Are you our customer? I'm not sure that we know you. And she said, no, but you stole my uterus. And I said, okay. And so I went back inside, and as I recall, I got an umbrella, and I walked back out, and I said, well, if you're going to pick it, I'm going to pick it with you. And so we're walking down the side. We're both walking down the sidewalk. And after about a half an hour of me chatting her up, 45 minutes, I asked her to come inside again. She did come inside, and she showed me a long letter that she had written. And this poor woman, unfortunately, it sounds like what I could gather is it sounded like in the 50s when they were sterilizing people who they felt were not of their right mind, that she was one of those people that they sterilized because she had this long thing. And so we called social services and had them help her out. But she was certainly on one of the other extremes.
Wow.
So that's a couple of them.
Oh, that's
Earlier
the price you paid for that great real estate you had.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Earlier, you had mentioned, this is real early in the conversation, you had mentioned about insurance.
Right.
And some type of umbrella. I think you called it umbrella insurance.
That's correct.
For dealerships that aren't aware, maybe what that is, maybe you can go into that just real quick, just a little bit deeper.
Sure.
What's it cover for the dealerships? How much should they have, or what do you base that on?
Sure. So the first thing, literally one of the first things I do for my consulting clients is I say, you don't have to tell me this math, but I want you to do this math in your head. Tell me how much your land and building are worth. Then add your used car inventory if it's not floored. Add your parts inventory, and then add your blue sky to that number. And do you have that number in mind? And for a 1-point location, that number is probably in the 16, 17 million and up range. Something like that, depending on the size of the land, the size of the building, and that kind of thing. And then I say, okay, let's get your insurance policy. And literally, this is one of the first things I do. And literally every single time I do this, there's a problem. I've yet to run into, a dealership that this was not a problem. And then we look and say, how much umbrella insurance do you have? And generally it's between 5 and 7 million. So I say to the business owner, here's what that means. If your parts driver hits a school bus full of kids and you get sued as a result, and a school bus has, I think, 77 kids on it, and we do the quick math, and I said, do you think that, whatever it is, $28,000, $30,000 is going to cover it with 77 kids plus the attorney's fees? Right? You have $6 million. So that's the maximum your insurance company is going to pay in the case of a catastrophic problem. And they say, of course not. And I say, you have to have enough umbrella coverage to at least cover the assets of the company, right? Yeah. And so at a minimum for car dealerships, I recommend 20 million. If you don't have $20 million of umbrella coverage, then you're exposed for an accident. So what that means is that the lawyer sues you and wins, they're going to own your dealership. You'll have to literally turn the keys over to them because you don't have enough insurance to cover it. The cost for that kind of insurance is generally anywhere between $1,000 and $2,000 per million, depending on what your loss runs look like and your exposures and lots of other factors. So you're really talking about somewhere between $20,000 to $40,000 a year to get covered. And part of my job as a risk mitigator is to make sure you can sleep at night. And this is the first thing. This makes me nervous on your behalf, right? I mean, because I see this problem over and over, and dealers are just not covering themselves. And now, in accidents isn't the only thing that protects, but and they're depending on how the garage, what's called the garage package, there'll be other things that might be covered. Truth in lending, truth in leasing. Some of those things will go up in the garage. Sometimes the employment-related practices coverage. Employment-related practices coverage is what, if an employee goes to the EEOC or an employee sues you for something, or that's employment-related practices. So sometimes in some insurance,
cyber breaches?
Cyber breaches generally are only covered in a garage package. Usually there's only $250,000 of coverage. So I obviously advocate standalone cyber policies. And with the new Gramm-Leach-Bliley regulations going into effect on December 9th of this year, all that's been blown up. And there's now a whole new set of rules and laws and regulations and how to comply with that. That could be its own DealerRefresh Gramm-Leach-Bliley Friday.
Yeah. What's that? What's it called?
It's the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which was originally enacted in 2003, but new regulations came out in October of last year, and dealers are required to comply with that by December the 9th of this year. So, so the cyber insurance is typically not part of that umbrella, Alex. Very unusual for it to be, but that is a standalone coverage that I advocate, because in today's crazy world, I don't know if you read last year, they found out that the Russians had been in, I don't know if you read this in the newspaper, the Russians were in the State Department computers and they discovered that they had been there for like 6 months or something, and nobody knew it. I never heard that they evicted them from the State Department computers, by the way. I never saw that news, so they could still be in there for all I know. So there's no such thing as a safe computer. I mean, none of us are protected from this. So this is really one of those protections that as a dealership you really should look at.
What about the vendors of car dealers?
Yeah, so I'll give you two different examples. So number one, the new Gramm-Leach-Bliley regulations say that your data has to be encrypted, both quote at rest and in transit. Has to be encrypted at rest and in transit. So any tech vendors that you have, you're going to have to get with them and make sure that their tech is encrypted at rest and in transit. I've seen very few vendors right now that are complying with that. They have till December the 9th, and you're required to get that in writing because it's your data. So the Federal Trade Commission isn't going to listen to, well, that's the vendor and I don't own them, and so that's not how that's going to work. Depending on the nature of the vendor, Alex, I would, and this is a really big one. One good example is the folks who haul away your batteries, your used oil, your used antifreeze, all of those kinds of things. Not, I had a company that I worked with. And I said, you really need to get an insurance certificate to make sure that they're insured for whatever they're hauling. This was a garbage hauler. This was a company who did garbage hauling. I said, I'd like to see their pollution certificate. And this was a local company. They didn't have pollution insurance. The waste company didn't have pollution insurance. And the dealer thought I was a moron by asking for it. What do you mean? Of course they have pollution insurance. They're in the pollution business. I said, I still want to see the certificate. Get the certificate. Well, it turns out they didn't have any.
Wow.
So it can be as simple as, the garbage vendor. And that, by the way, ends up in landfill and Superfund sites. And then they sue you because they take the bill of lading and they trace it back. And I just had a client go through all this. So, and that can be covered by your pollution coverage. But yes, the vendor, depending on the nature of the vendor you're talking about, Alex, it's prudent to find out if they have insurance and what happens if there's a breach. I always part of my job is what if this happens? What if that happens? And are you prepared for it? And so I try to get the dealers prepared for what happens if, and that can be what happens if the local media comes in, what happens if the tire vendor throws all your tires in the river and they trace them back to you. It's a whole variety.
God, shit you don't even think about. Never even consider. Keep me up at night thinking about all that.
Sorry, not sorry.
Now, when you were talking about the vendors and the cyber part, basically that's if you've got a vendor that's dealing with any type of consumer sensitive information, correct?
Right. That's the Gramm-Leach-Bliley is all about protecting consumer information.
So Drew Ament just threw a comment up on that front. He was talking about ADFs. Right. So this is the standard of how lead information gets passed. Typically lead information. It's a whole bunch of other things too. This is how leads might get passed from an auto trader to a CRM system, for example.
Right.
And yeah, he's right. There's definitely some lead providers that might be sending a whole credit app in plain text via ADF.
Right.
What are the fields that, obviously a credit app, if you're looking at, date of birth and social security number, but is it like typical contact information? Does that apply? First name, last name, email, phone?
They updated the regulation from the 2003 regulations, and now personally identifiable information includes home address. So where we grew up with the phone book, right? Here they are, right?
Yeah.
Now that's considered protected information. So now any information being transmitted by a vendor is going to have to be encrypted. Otherwise, you're going to be out of bounds with the Gramm-Leach-Bliley regulations.
Wow.
So it's a big change, and dealers are not, either they haven't heard of it, they're not prepared, they're not thinking about it, but it's going to be quite something to have to deal with. And there's no one, contrary to a couple of folks who I've heard talk about this, there's no app that you can use to comply. This isn't only an app that you need to have. There are apps out there that'll help you comply with maybe 10 or 15% of it, maybe 20, but there's a whole lot of analog work that has to go through, and having a data breach response plan. And, what do you do if you have a data breach response, and how are you keeping your data in terms of, do you have a data retention policy? When do you get rid of data? I have one colleague considers, he considers data. He says that the FTC considers data like toxic waste. If you're not using it, you need to get rid of it. And that's kind of what the data retention policy is about, right? If you've got a customer who's hasn't been into the store in 10 years and you haven't heard from them in 10 years, why are they still in your data, right? I mean, that's just a liability when it comes right down to it.
True.
So Thomas, the updates to that regulation from 2003, are the updates too new to know how the enforcement and punishment will be yet?
That's correct. So nobody knows what the enforcement or the punishment. The FTC said the fines, I think, are $46,000 per. Nobody knows whether it's per incident or per name or per. Nobody knows.
California's got something similar. So once you've got, I think it's like 20,000 or 10,000 people who are, California residents in your database, then you've got some pretty strict standards to apply with on that front as well. It sounds very similar to that, though.
It is. In this case, I think it's 5,000. Anything, and I don't know of any dealership that doesn't have at least 5,000. I mean, unless they're, some of the independents might not, but anybody who has a service department or a body shop or that they're just going to easily exceed 5,000.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, as promised, this
so
was going to be a scary show. Scary, but necessary to hear.
Yeah, if someone has some additional questions or anything, Tom, just give us a rundown on how they could reach out to you.
Sure, Jeff. Thanks. So my company's name is Better Vantage Point. So you can go to bettervantagepoint.com, or you can call me directly on my cell phone, 757-434-7656.
Do we have to encrypt that?
With me, no. Or my email address is tomk@bettervantagepoint.com. So
Cool.
any of that's great. Thanks for asking.
Got it. I'll get your URL and stuff posted over in the forums underneath this post for Refresh Friday. So that way it's out there.
I saw on your website that you offer the first free hour of consulting.
Yeah, that is true. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just call me up. We'll schedule a time. Talk about if I brought up some issues you want to talk about here, or if I have enough advance chance, I'll go on your website and see if you have asterisks there. Also, by the way, in the last couple of minutes, let me just say this. The biggest problem that dealerships have is they're not responding properly to their online complaints. It's the biggest source of regulatory as well as legal problems. What you have to do to make sure that you don't have those problems, if somebody posts, get them back in the store and fix it. The end.
Is that like a review where they're
the review, right? This place sucks. They didn't do this. They didn't give me a widget. Mm-hmm. They didn't give me a tire. Just give them the widget. Give them the tire. Ask them to update, not change. If you ask them to change their review, they go crazy. But if you help them out and you listen to them, and I do, there's some webinars on my YouTube channel, Jeff. I also have a YouTube channel under Better Vantage Point. So a lot of this information's on my YouTube channel. But if you bring them in, ask them to update their review, it does two things. Number one, we all know that 90% of the people look at dealership reviews before they go and buy from the dealership. So it shows that they care. And so it acts as a sales tool in ensuring customer satisfaction. It shows how you work as a company, and it prevents lawsuits. So it's a twofer, and it's a great twofer, and it's probably one of the most important risk mitigation tools that I talk about up front, and what will stop most of the problems.
We've been talking about. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. We've been talking about reviews and reputation management for 15 years on DealerRefresh, and that is the first I ever considered from a legal standpoint. Yeah, that could be. Yeah,
and it's not, like I said, it's not just legal. It's the right thing to do. It's the way it's the way to get your customers happy, so they'll buy from you again. Right? There's so many studies that say that if you just help the customer, they will be loyal to you. It's like I checked into a Marriott once at 12 o'clock at night, and they'd given my room away. And the front desk clerk said, what do they say? There's nothing I can do for you. And I said to the front desk clerk, there's 50 things you could do for me. You could buy me breakfast. You could offer to pay for a cab for me to go to another hotel. You could put me up in the manager's cot in the back because it's midnight. There's always something you can do. So training, that's all a cultural thing, is making sure that your people know what to do, how to do it. And you have to have one person, in my opinion, Jeff, you have to have one person designated to be that person to fix the problems. And they have to have the authority to do it, because the worst thing is when the customer goes in, says, here's my problem, and they say, I have to go check with my boss. You've lost all credibility. And then the whole thing goes down the tubes. Then they feel like they're wasting their time. A lot of it is just listening. You have to know how to actively listen properly. And again, on my YouTube, I go through this in quite some detail about how to listen to a customer, and because you've got to get them back on your side. Really important. And I think it's a very fundamental business practice that I think dealers miss. They're too busy concentrating on what to write on the response, of which there's really nothing good you can write other than "we suck, we're sorry, and we'll fix it. Come on in." I mean, say that in 10 different ways, but there's I see lots of. I did a whole webinar at a national convention. In the whole hour, it wasn't a webinar, a seminar. The whole hour is I took dealer responses and told them why those sucked. So I every single slide on the PowerPoint was a real one, and what they said and why they shouldn't have said it. It was a fun seminar to do.
That's great. Yeah, I'm going to check out your YouTube. Maybe I'll get some of those videos posted over in DealerRefresh as well. Sounds like they're pretty informative.
I try to put it all out there. So
I almost feel like we should have a running thread on DealerRefresh that says "Ask Tom anything."
That's right. Well, you know, Alex, on my on my LinkedIn profile, I've got the red phone behind my name, right? So that's, call me. I'm available.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, next time we'll do this on a Friday the 13th or something, and
that'd be great. We'll all wear black and have cats and walk under ladders and stuff.
Break some mirrors.
Yeah.
Yeah, break some mirrors. That's a good one.
Well, Tom, I appreciate your expertise here. It's definitely like there's been a few times I've really held back and not dropped the what. And I'm sure there's a few people who have that same reaction.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have my phone on silent now, but after we conclude, I'll take it off silent. So happy to get your call in any way.
Awesome. We definitely appreciate it. Great information.
Sure. And if you guys want, I'll come back and do part 2, and we can talk about any one of these things, or
Yep.
I'm happy to share what I know.
Absolutely.
Cool. Awesome.
Thanks, Tom.
Well, thanks for having me.
Make it a great weekend.
Yep. You too. I appreciate it.